The race for supersonic flight was on. Now, test pilot André Turcat was ready to take the French Concorde past Mach 1, the speed of sound. This was the most dangerous part of the test program. It would push the aircraft to its limits.
There was no nervousness. If you're nervous in a situation like this, you should change your job. You must never be nervous, always calm.
Inside, a flying laboratory was ready to record every jolt and twitch of Concorde's airframe.
1, 2, 3, top!
Afterburners, usually reserved for fighter jets, kick-started Concorde on its roll to over 250 miles an hour, faster than a Formula One racing car. Concorde's distinctive visor was raised to shape the fuselage into a rocket. As the Concorde approached Mach 1, Turcat offered the glory of breaking the sound barrier to his co-pilot, Jean Pinet.
I said to him, well, now you take it to Mach 1. He was really happy. And it was him who took the first flight to Mach 1.
There was almost no sensation of traveling faster than the speed of sound. The smoothness of the flight was largely due to a startling innovation: fly-by-wire. Pilots had relied on mechanical linkages to move the flaps and rudders. Now, computers analyzed and relayed Turcat's commands to the control surfaces. On following flights, Turcat pushed the aircraft on to its limit, over twice the speed of sound, and held it there in continuous supersonic flight. A feat no aircraft had ever achieved before.
Things did begin to warm up. The air conditioning was not fully working, and the oil got hot. But we stayed there for 52 minutes, at Mach 2, while the American prototype, the US model, was still stuck on the ground. So we were really the first.
Technically, it was a massive leap. I mean, only now, 40 years after the first flight, are things that Concorde had really becoming the norm. The brakes, the fly-by-wire flying controls, some of the systems, the engine control systems. It really was a massive challenge.
Mr. Wedgwood Ben, Minister of Technology, and Monsieur Jean Chamon, French Minister of Transport, were ready to cut the tapes and launch the greatest airliner ever built.
Concorde looked ready to take the world by storm. 16 major airlines placed options for a staggering 74 aircraft. No one wanted to be seen without a Concorde. But the airliner of the future had come at an incredible cost to the French and British taxpayers.
The escalation was on a massive scale. I mean, it cost far more than the company had anticipated. But once you start something like this, you can't pull out.
The project, initially budgeted at £150 million, ended up costing £1.5 billion of taxpayers' money. It was a price the US was not prepared to pay. Boeing scrapped their supersonic rival. The ambitious swept-wing design got no further than an expensive wooden mock-up, costing almost as much as the finished Concorde. It did give the world in-flight entertainment. But Wall Street wasn't prepared to fund it.
Wall Street is not worried about national pride, they're only worried about making money. And when they looked at the numbers for supersonic transport, the numbers just didn't make sense to them.
Wall Street had decided to put its money into another Boeing aircraft. The Jumbo. This was aircraft manufacture on a shipbuilding scale. It wouldn't even go half as fast as Concorde, but it could take over 4 times the number of passengers at a fraction of the cost. Now Concorde was in a new race of speed versus size. To drum up more sales, a Concorde prototype left England to go on a 46,000-mile world sales tour. Flying the flag for Britain was Conservative Aerospace Minister and nervous flyer, Michael Heseltine.
I'd always been rather apprehensive of flying, and so being told that I was going in a prototype but hadn't got a certificate of airworthiness, something like that, was pretty appalling as a concept. And then we set off down this runway. The only reassuring thing for me was that the British aerospace employees who were there just went to sleep. So I thought, well, you know, they must know something I don't.
Crowds flocked to see the new wonder of the age. But when Concorde arrived in Sydney, the reception wasn't so warm. Protesters had come to demonstrate about Concorde's noise and pollution.
In real terms, the Concorde was a noisy aircraft.
But it wasn't just noise. Environmentalists warned that Concorde's engines would pollute the atmosphere, unleashing disasters from melting ice caps to freezing cold winters. These apocalyptic scenarios proved wildly exaggerated. But Concorde did have one nasty little habit. Its sonic boom.
When an aircraft goes supersonically, there is a very large boom, and it's heard on the ground, and it can literally break windows.
The sonic boom is a continuously produced explosion of sound. The result of shock waves generated at the front and back of the plane. On the ground, it's heard as 2 bangs as the aircraft passes overhead.
There was anxiety in the cabinet about the bang, and so on one cabinet occasion I told the Prime Minister I was going to bring Concorde over at midday. So as we got to 12, I was getting a little bit nervous, and then I heard a bit of a bang, and people were sort of slightly shaken by it, but it wasn't as big a problem as anyone had thought.
Concorde's designers also thought her booms wouldn't be too much of a nuisance.
I believe the element of alarm will be absent. It's a very characteristic noise, the double bang. There's no danger of people mistaking it for their mother-in-law shooting themselves.
But tests on the public were not encouraging. And when Concorde flew down what became known as Boom Alley along the west coast of Britain, thousands complained. One Scottish woman alleged that the booms had made her pregnant by interrupting her rhythm method of contraception. The sonic booms spelt disaster.
There was no way that any government was going to allow a supersonic airplane to fly routinely over land. And in so doing, it effectively cut about half of all the world's routes away from Concorde.
It was a devastating handicap for a world sales tour.
We were trying to sell it, so we were concentrating on the sales. The problem was there weren't any sales.
Not a single one. Bad news, as Concordes were now rolling off the production line. Worse followed. Airlines cancelled their 74 aircraft. Concorde was too noisy, too expensive, too costly to service, and too thirsty in a world facing rising oil prices. Everyone had decided to buy 747s.
No true private commercial airline bought the aircraft. They saw the business model and they realized they weren't going to make money on it, so they didn't buy it. Plain and simple.
The French and British governments had one last option: to sell Concorde to their own national airlines. But with empty sales books, they smelt a bargain.
I had to deal with British Airways, and there is not the slightest doubt they screwed me to the floorboards. I mean, basically, we gave it to them.
British Airways took delivery of 7 shiny new Concordes, and on the 21st of January 1976, prepared to take their first passengers supersonic. But there was turbulence ahead. American protesters had persuaded the New York Airport Authority to ban Concorde on grounds of noise.
Concorde's survival depended on its permission to operate between London and New York and London. It had to have the blue ribbon route.
So would the environmental movement finally wreck the supersonic dream?